So Cocoapods, they have their own website. Basically, tells you a little more about it. So while I explain what it is, you guys should run this command in your terminal to install it if you want to follow along. You'll definitely need to do that. So sudo gem install Cocoapods. And this might take a little bit, so definitely try to install it now, and then we could discuss like what it is and some examples of it. All right, so if you guys don't know, you can go to guides.cocoapods.org, or it's just sudo gem install Cocoapods. I'm going to switch to a different tab now. Has everyone got it? Okay, I also posted something, some images here on Piazza if you guys want to download them. There's 2 images that we'll be using in today's project. You don't have to use images, but if you want to follow along, you could download that too. Okay, so we talked about SnapKit. So all of these CocoaPods have GitHub repos, and they're all like open source. So when we talked about SnapKit, so we could go, search GitHub and type SnapKit and read about it. So it's an auto layout for iOS. And usually how these work is there's, the fancy name, it tells you like which version, and then there's usually like a little guide here. So it usually tells you how to install it. So if you don't have CocoaPods, you install CocoaPods, and then we'll get into like installing it for like an Xcode project. But then they'll give you like quick starts, like, this is how you use SnapKit. You have to import it, just like how we import UIKit or import Foundation. We have to import it, then we use it right here where you're adding constraints to the UI view. It's pretty self-explanatory. Same with Alamo Fire. It is an HTTP networking in Swift. So this one has a little more complex description, but we can see installation's the same. We're going to add this line to our pod file, and you guys don't know what a pod file is yet, but you will. And then we do the same thing. We import it, and then it'll tell us how to use it and like what we need. So basically, the idea behind this is if someone built a cool third-party library, why try to rebuild it again when they open sourced it? You could use it for your projects. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions? Okay, sweet. Let's see. So today, also side note, like one thing that's really cool is you could go to github.com/trending/Swift and see like what's popping with the new Swift libraries that people do. So like this top one's called What's New, and like let's click on it and see what it is. So basically, showcasing new features in your apps, updates similar to Pages, Numbers, and Keynote. So basically, what this pod will do is give you this nice screen if you have an update to your app and you want to let users know what it is, right? So it tells you what to do, how to execute it, what to do, and everything, and yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat to see like what's up. Like this one, it's an iOS picker to serve all your picking needs, and you see some examples, and it's like, okay, like look, someone built this. Like it probably would take a lot to do this again if you want to do it on your own. So if someone already did it, use it, right? That's the whole point. Does everyone finish installing CocoaPods? It finished? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, sweet. All right, let's jump straight into a project. So we're gonna go to Xcode. We're gonna do our usual new project. Single view application as always. Let's call it lecture 7. That's 2, because I already have lecture 7. Okay, so lecture 7, Swift, the basics, next. I'll just save it on my desktop. Create a new folder for it. All right, let me create a new folder for it. All right. Okay, pretty, self-explanatory. We've done this 1,000 times. We're going to do the same thing what we do since we don't use storyboards anymore. We're going to go to our app delegate, add that boilerplate code. So we're going to create a navigation controller. Let me make this bigger. All right, sweet. Okay, so let navigation controller equal UI navigation controller. with the root controller just being a view controller, which we'll initialize. Then we set the window equals a UI window with the frame being UI screen.main.bounds. And we have our window dot root view controller equals our navigation controller. And then all we want to do is window dot make key and visible. And what this will do is this will show it. So now we don't really need our storyboard, so you don't even have to touch it or anything. This will just launch. So 4 lines. We've seen this before. It's all boilerplate, so we're good. So now, the fun thing. We're going to have to go into our terminal. Let me make this bigger. Oh, wait. Okay, so I'm on my desktop right now, and we want to go to our lecture 7 folder. So I'm going to cd into it. And now we have our lecture Xcode project and the folder containing our files. So once we get to here, we're going to create something called a pod file. So what a pod file is it holds all our pods we want to add to our project. So if we wanted to add SnapKit and Alamo Fire, it would be all held in our pod file so our project knows what to install. So to start this off, we have to do pod init. So what this will do is this will create a new pod file. So if we run that command and give it a second, then you should, now if you look at you type ls and look at the files, you should see a third one now called pod file. So we're going to want to open this up. So I'm going to use Atom. Whatever you do, don't use text edit on a Mac. It has like smart quotes and really screws things over. So use like Sublime or Atom or another. You can even use Xcode as your text editor. It really doesn't matter. And we're going to open this up to see what's inside of it. Okay. Once it loads, okay. Okay, let me just clear out these panes. So here we have our target, which is our project, our do, which is saying like we're going to use frameworks, but we don't have any frameworks installed in our end. So, oops. Okay, so we're going to add a pod. So let's go back to Safari, and let's say, you know, we go to cocoapods.com or .org and look for, I don't know, something to do with buttons. You could search buttons, and you know, there's a lot of cool button stuff we could do. And we found this one that I already had. It's called Floaty. So it's like, this is a cool like GitHub repo. Like, let's check what this does. It's simple floating action button for your iOS, and it shows a little GIF, and it's like, hey, you know, we could add this to our app. Let's have this cool little menu slick button thingy. So all we have to do is read down, look at installation. So for Cocoapods, under the use frameworks line that we have, we're going to do pod floaty, and it says 3.0.0. Use 4.0.0 for Swift 4. So we're using Swift 4. So all we have to do is go back to back to Atom, or wherever you have your pod file open, and type pod. Oops, sorry. Wait. Yeah. So we're going to type pod, single quotes, floaty, or double, it doesn't matter, comma, single quotes, tilde, arrow, 4.0.0. And then we're going to want to save that. Is that clear to everyone? We're just sort of going to add this cool GitHub repo we found, this third-party framework, to our project. So that's cool. We added this, but didn't really do anything in Xcode yet. So we got to pop back into our terminal and type pod install. So what this will do is it's going to read the pod file and install all the pods it found into our project. Okay, so it's analyzing dependencies. It found we want to use Floaty 4.0.0, so it's generating the project, and it's going to use it. Does this not work for anyone? Yes. Did it say like it's like red? Try doing pod space repo space update. Okay, and that should fix it.
Maybe do something different. It says setting up Cocoapods master repo.
It's still running?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. If you use it for the first time, it might do that stuff. Yeah, when it's done. Do you want? Daniel will help you. Does anyone else have any other questions? Okay, hopefully yours is green. Maybe, yes. No? Okay. All right. So now, what we're going to do is we're actually going to close our Xcode project. And the reason we're going to do this is because now if we look at the files, it created a XC workspace. So after you install a pod, hold on. After you install a pod, you can't use the Xcode proj file you've been always using. You have to use a new one called XC Workspace. Same exact thing, except it's a workspace and it allows you to use third-party dependencies. So now we could just open lecture2.xc workspace. And this will be the same project we had. Nothing, all our code is still the same. It's just a workspace instead of an Xcode proj. I'll change my simulator to the 7. All right. So let's just pop into our view controller, and then we could just do, all I'm going to do is change the background color, just dot gray, and let's build this. You could also see in the bottom left over here, there's a new sort of project it looks like called Pods, and that can give you access to your pods that you have. So we have Floaty, and so we could, if we wanted to, we could view all the source code for Floaty. It's all here, if you wanted to. But okay, so let's build this. Oops. There we go. And let's see what we have. We should just have, should be the same old view controller with a navigation controller, and our background should just be gray. Okay, well, while this is loading, I'll also add some other code. So we'll give it a title, so the navigation controller could have a title. My Mac wants to respond. Does anyone have any questions on what Cocoapods is? Or still confused? Or wants to know why we use it or anything? Or the spinning wheel of death? Yes. That's a good question, and I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to it. Yeah, that's a cool name. There's other types of dependency managers too, but Cocoapods is probably the best one. So you might see other ones like on the project installation, you'll see other things, but Cocoapods usually they all support it. So while this is still building up, let's give it a title. We'll call it fruit or veggie. Fruits or veggies. You'll see where we're going with this. Perfect. We have our just gray background, nothing. Sweet. Okay, now, could anyone tell me what this line does? What does this line allow us to do? Why do we do this? Yes. Yeah, but like, what's inside of a UI kit package? Yeah, like UI button, anything that has a UI prefix, we have to import that. So just like how we do that, so we have access to UI button, UI view, UI label. Let's import Floaty. It should just pop up. And if you just installed the pod and haven't built the project yet, it won't recognize it. So it's good to just build it, and then it should be able to import. So perfect. We have our Floaty. So let's go back. Let's read the documentation. So it gives you some storyboard setup, but we don't use that anymore. It's for beginners. Right here. So let Floaty equal Floaty, Floaty.add item, and then we add it to the sub view. Pretty straightforward. So let's do that. So I'll start out by creating a global variable within inside of this class called var Floaty, and it is going to have type Floaty, and we're going to say there will definitely always be a Floaty. Okay, so now let's go and create a new function, and we'll call it setup view. So what this will do is we'll call this, and this will set up our view. So we're going to start by actually, initializing Floaty. So we're going to say Floaty equals Floaty, straight from the documentation. So if we look at the documentation, Floaty equals Floaty. And now what we're going to do is, let's get rid of this, it's driving me crazy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do Floaty dot add item hello world, just like it did in the example, and then we'll do view dot add subview Floaty. 3 simple lines. We copied them straight from the docs, and let's build this and see what we get. Oh wait, this won't work because we have to call setup view. There we go. So let it rebuild. And then we should have something pretty awesome. So look at that. 3 lines of code. We got this fancy little material button here. And if we click it, there's our button. It even has a fancy animation and everything. You guys could have done this yourself. Everything here is possible to do on your own. But if someone already built it, why rebuild it? Why reinvent the wheel if it's already there? So we're just going to use it. That's the whole point. Okay, so if you guys downloaded the images earlier, I'm going to import those now. So we're going to create 2 image sets. One's going to be a tomato. You'll see where we're going. And the other one's going to be a question mark. I'm just going to change these to a single scale. So if you just see question mark, and then go down here to single scale, just so we only have to put one. Okay. And I'm just going to see, this is my tomato. Nice tomato. And a question mark. Perfect. So those assets are added. Now let's go back to our view controller, and let's read more about the Floaty documentation, because let's say we don't want our button to just be a blank white button. We keep going. Oh, sweet. Use an icon. We could just do Floaty.add item hello world with an icon. Seems pretty straightforward. So now, if we stop this, let's go Floaty.add item. Here we go. So let's title it something different. We'll title it Ask Me Anything. And we'll give it a icon, and we'll just type question mark. And it should autofill. And there's your question mark. So now when we run it, remember, this is all from the documentation. I haven't had to look in the source code or anything. Now when we build it, if it wants to build, we should see an image. And that is awesome. Okay, so it's launching. And now we're going to click on it. Perfect, there's a question mark. Ask me anything. We click on it, nothing happens. So we're going to need a way to figure out when we click this button. So back to the documentation. Very key. Documentation is very important. We're going to see using a handler. So we have a title, we have an icon. Oh, sweet. It looks like when this button gets called, a UI alert view pops up, alert controller. So now let's add that one. So now we just need to add a handler. So what we could do there is, we'll see, it'll autofill for us, add item. Here we go. It has a title, it has an icon, and it has a handler. So what you could do here is, we'll add the string, we'll add the icon. Wants to load. Question mark. And then here we could just double click on this, and it'll sort of fill us in the boilerplate code. And we could just say button as will be passed in. We'll have our code, and for right now, we'll just say print pressed button. And we'll come back to this later, but basically, as you'll guess, this will just, every time we press that button, it'll say press button. Okay. That is fine. So we're going to end up also using another pod tonight, and it's a pretty cool one. And so once we check that this works, I think I'll show you that one, we'll install that one, and then we'll start using it. So it's loading, and as you expected, I press it, and press button. Pressed it, press button. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. Is everyone following? Any questions? Clear? All right. So now, let's say, does anyone here have AirPods or seen AirPods or heard of them? You guys know when you open it and you open it to your phone, that little animation pops up and it shows you like how much charge if you want to pair it. It's like a nice little cool card view. Well, believe it or not, there's a pod for that. Someone made it. So, like, look at these. This is beautiful. You know, when you want to ask a question, you know, you want to ask them for push notifications or, you know, choose your favorite or stuff like that. There's a pod for this. It's called bulletin board. So you could just go on GitHub and type in bulletin board and you'll find this one. So let's install it. So we'll read. Sweet. All we have to do is pod bulletin board. So we'll copy this line. We'll open our pod file again. And you guessed it, we're just going to add pod bulletin board. So we'll just add a pod bulletin board. So one thing I want to talk to you quickly is about this little, how we specify a version. So every time we run pod install, Floaty 4.0.0 will be installed. But every time we run pod install, the latest version of bulletin board will be installed. So if you want to stay on a specific version for whatever reason, you should specify the version. If you don't care, if you're like, yeah, give me the update, then just running nothing, that'll work. Sweet, we added it. Let's save it. I'm going to close out of there, pod bulletin board, and we're going to run pod install. So we want to install this pod. Yeah, let's do its things. It found that we want to install bulletin board. It knows we already have Floaty installed. So it's generating the project. And then we should be good. Perfect. Pod install complete. So now we can hop back into our Xcode project. Let us just build. So it can compile bulletin board. You see it says building bulletin board. So then we can be able to use that in our project. And while this is building, let's pop over to the documentation for bulletin board. So we can see displaying bulletins. To display bulletin, you first need to create a root item, blah, blah, blah. Gives us some nice boilerplate code we could just copy. And then tells you to present. You need to call both of these methods. Makes sense. And it can get more, like it tells you exactly what a title means, what an image, description, action, and alternative. You go on and on and on. So most documentations are very, very thorough, and that's good for us. So if we pop back into our project, we should see we still have press button. Perfect. So now let's go back to here, and we're going to have to import bulletin board, and it pops right up. And now we can use that in our view controller. So for every file or every view controller you want to use these, you have to import them as well. It's not just like a one-time thing. So perfect. Now what shall we do? Let us go create another global variable. Let's see how they do it. They say lazy var, it's activated Siri. Lazy var, bulletin manager, blah, 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 blah. So we can just copy this and paste it in here. We'll get rid of this line and redefine it as page bulletin item. But the reason why I chose that is because if you read down creating page items, we want to create a page bulletin item because we want to create this little nice, sleek pop-up. So we could do is we do let page bulletin item, and then it'll autofill with a title, and we could title it fruit or vegetable. Okay. And once we do this, we can also add some other. So we could do root item dot image equals our tomato, which we added earlier. We could do root item dot description text, and that'll equal our tomatoes, fruits, or vegetables. Nobody seems to know the answer. And then we could say, then what we want to do is we sort of want to give two options, right? So what tells us here, this big button is called action button title, and the smaller one's called alternative button title. So we'll go back and we'll add those. So root item dot action button title, and that'll equal, we'll say fruit. And we'll say for the alternative one, the person could choose vegetable. Okay, and that looks like all we need to do. And sweet, perfect. So now we have this built in here, but we don't really actually use it yet. So if we go back to documentation, it said we have to use bulletin manager.prepare and bulletin manager.present bulletin above self. So how about every time we click ask me anything, instead of just printing, we press the button, let's show that bulletin. So we could do bulletin manager.prepare, and make sure you really follow the documentation, because here it says always call prepare before you call present. Failure to do so will cause a precondition failure, aka your app will crash. So make sure you always read the documentation. So we call prepare, and it's saying it's going to need a self, so we'll just fix that. And we also do self.bulletinmanager.present bulletin above self, because we want to present on the current view controller. Is that clear to everyone? So now once we build it, we should have something pretty cool. Okay. So it loads up. Now fruits or veggies. We're gonna click Ask Me Anything. And look, we get this nice card view. We added like 6 lines of code. We didn't have to lay out anything. We just had to set these questions. And then, is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable? It's a fruit? It's neither? Are we sure it's a fruit? What if I tricked you? Okay, it's a fruit. And we click it, nothing happens. So we need to add functions for what happens when you click on these buttons. So that's fine too. So where we're gonna go? Back to the documentation, because I don't know how to do it with this whole setup. So we're gonna read, customizing appearance. That's cool, but we're not really worried with colors right now. Now we're worried about text size. Oh, perfect. Handling tabs. So we have the action handler for when the action button is tapped, which is the bigger button, and the alternative handler when the smaller one is tapped. So let's add that in here. So we're going to add root item dot action handler equals, and let's see the code it gave us. I'm just going to copy this. So basically what this is saying is when the big button gets pressed, it's going to call back and currently print action button tapped. But we could do better. We could say, why don't you do self dot bulletin manager dot, what is it? How do you dismiss it? It's a good question. I probably should read the documentation. Let's see. Dismiss. Oh. Dot dismiss bulletin. Sweet. So we could do self dot bulletin manager. Oh wait, I know why. Okay. So because we're declaring this variable here, it's better if, let's just call a function called dismiss bulletin. And we'll create that function called dismiss bulletin. And all this will do, bulletin manager dot dismiss, and we'll have it animated so it goes down and it looks nice. So beautiful. So all we did was we add root item dot action handler, self, and that's the self, and we're saying, hey, when this button gets pressed, just dismiss it for now, and this function dismiss bulletin will just dismiss the bulletin. And we'll add the same code, so I'll just copy and paste this for the alternative action handler. The alternative handler, same exact code, we just want to dismiss it. And once we run this, we should be able to see we should be able to dismiss it. So let it load up. So you guys see the code. So we click it, ask me anything, fruit or vegetable. We're going to say it's a fruit, and it dismisses. We'll do it again. Does it work for vegetable? Sweet. Now let's say we want to add one last main component here. We want to add a nice label right smack in the middle that tells us what answer we picked. So to do that, it's, you're pretty used to it. All you have to do is var answer label. It's the UI label. And we're just going to declare it there, exclamation mark. That means, there will be an answer label always. So now we're going to head down to Setup View. And we're going to say, so we can make some comments. So this is floaty. And then we'll have our answer label. So we'll say our answer label is going to equal a UI label with a frame. And we're going to say that frame, that bounding box, is going to be, we'll just say 0.0. We'll just say, you know, I guess actually you don't even need to create a frame because we're just centering it. So a cool trick actually is answer label just equals UI label. And then you could do answer label dot center. Right, the center of the answer label is going to equal the center of our view. So basically our view, and then the label will be right smack in the middle. Questions? Sometimes if you're centering things, it's really easy to not do the whole frame setup. And then all we have to do is, let's say we're going to do answer label dot text color is dot white, and then all we have to do is add that to the subview. So basically now what we want to do is when we press on a button, I'll leave that here for a second. So it's 4 lines, create a UI label, center it, text color white, and add to subview. If we pop up to where we created these dismiss bulletin, before we dismiss it, let us set self.answer label.text equal to answer fruit. And then what we'll also do is we'll do self.answer label. You guys might have seen this before. Size to fit. So basically make sure all the text fit and nothing gets cut off, and it's a nice perfect bounding box around our string, which is answer fruit. And then all we have to do is self.answer label.center. We could also reset the center to be the view center. And the reason we do this is because now our label is different size, because we did size to fit and we changed the size, so we'll just make sure we recenter it just so nothing ever gets off. And I'm going to copy this for the other one, except instead of the answer, you could do vegetable. So one thing I want to point out really quick is you notice how these 4 lines of code right here are literally duplicated, except the string is just the only thing that's different. So one thing you could do if you're a smart developer like you guys is create a separate function and just you pass in the string you want to display, and this function will then set the string and do these three commands. But we'll just leave that for your own practice. Does that make sense? So if you see duplicate code, really try to condense it. It'll make your file smaller and make things more clear. But now let's build it and let's see what happens. So we should then, there should be nothing when we launch. Then we should ask the question, and then we should see our answer display on the screen. So ask me anything. So we'll choose a fruit. Then our answer was a fruit. And then let's try vegetable. Our answer is a vegetable. Does that make sense? So one last thing we could do is let's add more than one button here. Let's add like 3. So all we have to do is go to where we did floaty, and we'll just add floaty.add item. We'll just give them titles for now. Let's give it a string. Ask me nothing. And let's add another one. We could just say cats or dogs. Biggest debate. Okay, so we just literally added 2 more items, 1 line of code each. We didn't have to lay out the, you'll see there'll be an animation. You don't have to really do anything. So let's see this now. So we're going to click on the plus button. Look at that slick animation. We didn't have to do anything. We just added items. Right? So these currently do nothing because we haven't set anything for them, but you could make them do other things. You could make it pop up a cats or dogs, like they had in the example. Like if we head over to back to here, you could see that they had a, where do they have it? Like cats or dogs, right? So this is something that's like pretty cool that we just did. All this whole view we added is 80 lines to be condensed. 78 lines. And we had this nice, fresh, button menu selector. And then we had this nice pop-up. And then we could have an option. So do you guys see like how cool that is? Instead of writing like a lot of code to do the same thing, like you guys could build this. It'd be a pain. You could also build this. It'd be a pain. If someone has already done it, why do it? But now, so that's it for like coding, but I still want to talk about a little bit about like Cocoapods. So you guys now are exposed to Cocoapods, and all you're going to want to do is find packages to do stuff for you. So you should really think about, if you're adding a whole package just to do one minor thing, there's a lot of weight behind it sometimes. Just do it yourself, right? If you're going to use this thing a lot throughout your whole view or your whole app, it makes sense to use it. But at the end of the day, you really got to be careful. Because I remember when I took this class, we had this lecture, and then like in my next project, I had 10 different pods. And like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just thought they were cool. And like you find so many cool things. Like honestly, if you go to, the github.com/trending/Swift, like there's so much awesome stuff here. Let's see. There's, you could do the iOS 11 like these. Boom, there's a pod for it. There's like so much you could do. There's literally a repo that's called Awesome iOS, and it just has, it's like a place so you could find a bunch of pods. Right? If we were, let's go down to say like we want to do like a cool, see what keyboard ones are out there. Boom, it tells you a list of them. So we click on this one, see what it does. Like, ooh, it's fancy, whatever it does. It's keyboard commands. It's basically a clean, easy way to iOS keyboard showing dismissing. But yeah, so typist. Some of them don't have images, but it's nice when they do. But you get the idea. There's so much out there. It's insane. But you guys have a new power. Don't abuse it, please. So the reason why we taught this lecture is because next week when we go over networking, so when we say like we want to connect to like an API, we want to connect to like the Reddit API because we want to make our own Reddit app. We're going to have to network because we're going to have to make a call and say, hey, we want this information and get it back. So currently in Swift, it's like it's a lot of boilerplate. It's like not that nice. It's like a lot of code just to do a network request. So we'll be using something called Alamo Fire. So I know you guys have your project 6 and that's out, but if you guys finish and want to look around Alamo Fire, look it up on YouTube. There's so much documentation out there. It's one of the most popular. But yes, does anyone have any questions? No questions? Nothing? Yes. It's fruit. It has a seed. There's still debate though. Okay, with that, lecture is dismissed. Thanks for coming. So what this is doing is it's almost like a callback. So what's going to happen is when this handler, when it's like, oh, you press the button, it's going to pass back the item that was pressed. So you can, if you know, like, that's just a syntax for it. It works if you have like, like high order functions like map, reduce, or filter. Like that has the same type of
You can have functions.
Yeah, Swift. Yeah.
I thought
It's a mixture between functional and
okay, but it's still the same.
This is like an oscillator.
Like you
Yes,
can
it's for storage, so you can pass functions.
but
to
like,
other functions.
So you could have some functions like called handle input that takes the
I
string,
mean, I did add work
and then you can set both
I'm
string
good
and handle input with a different string.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that look like?
So just I think I set this down.
Yeah.
So basically, you have to see, like, let's see. So there's a cool
you guys
option click, and basically this action handler is a page bulletin void. So you basically have to create this function. So if we copy this,
I just started.
Are you serious, man?
we could say handler that basically
That's what it's on.
yeah.
You literally just have
I know we're gonna need it.
and you put it in JavaScript. And then you fix your stuff.
And then basically, then all we have to do is
Yeah. I'm just
there we go. So
I'm privileged I'm sitting now. Also, I only have one costume. Or, oh, shit, so I see that's the presentation. Like, three in the middle.
no, I'm not sure. I don't think you do, but let's just. Oh, it's expecting a return.
I mean, I just never talked to him.
So we could just
I did like
I don't know return.
But I was like, to be honest, so bad with names. I thought his name was fucking Dom.
Okay, so basically we can do get label dot text equals say like fruit for now, and then all you have to do is I'm pretty sure you can do yeah you. That's a good question. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
Hey, you forgot to
What?
stop recording.
Oh shoot.
You have to cut that and then trim that later.
Wait, do you know the like if I wanna I forget the syntax.